The night silence tasted like blood. The sky above Sariah 4 shimmered with a false calm, the kind that made old soldiers twitch, the kind that tasted like iron on the tongue. Jules Moraine had never fought in a war, but even he felt it. A pressure in his chest, an ache behind his eyes. He sat beside his daughter Mira in the middle of a soy field under the artificial dusk that never lifted from this terraformed colony. She was 7 with tangled hair and dirt on her knees, flipping through a picture book with faded pages. "Tell me the one about the starlight bird again," she said, voice soft. Jules smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. The bird who flew from Earth to Luna and back, delivering wishes to children. He glanced toward the horizon, sure, just once more. But the words didn't come, because the shimmer in the sky shifted subtly, unnaturally, the kind of shift that changes everything. There was no noise, no boom, just a line in the clouds that didn't belong. Then they came. Sleek silver vessels sliced through the atmosphere like knives. The warships of the Trian Dominion didn't announce themselves. No comms, no negotiations, no ultimatum. They simply descended and burned. The first explosion hit the Marana outpost, a medical hub just 5 clicks away. Jules saw the flare before he heard the sound. Then came the tremor, rolling through the soil like thunder trapped underground. Another blast struck the school dome. The shockwave flattened a grove of tall root trees and sent glass shimmering into the sky like deadly snowflakes. Jules didn't think. He grabbed Mira and ran. "Daddy," she cried out, but he didn't stop. His instincts, buried beneath years of peaceful farming, roared to the surface. Survival was now everything. Lights went out across the colony, one by one like dying stars. The power grid collapsed, screams rose, but they didn't last. The Dominion wasn't here for conquest. They weren't here for resources. They came to dominate, to make an example. And they chose a farming colony filled with medics, engineers, and school teachers. Neutral territory, demilitarized under the Galactic Accord. Supposed to be safe. A woman carrying a child tripped beside Jules. He tried to help until he saw the beam lance carve through her back, vaporizing her spine in a hiss of light. The child tumbled away, limp. Silent, a Dominion trooper, 8 feet tall, clad in black armor, stepped over the bodies like they were nothing. Jules almost screamed. Instead, he pressed Mira tighter to his chest and ducked behind a shattered irrigation pipe. They crouched there for what felt like hours, listening to the world end. Mira trembled silently. Her little fingers clutched his shirt with all the strength she had. "Where's Mommy?" she asked. Jules couldn't speak. His wife had been on shift at the medical dome. He had seen it disappear under a column of flame. He hadn't even turned to look. He couldn't. She's safe," he whispered. "We'll find her." He was lying, but she needed hope. As the fire spread, they moved through the ruins, avoiding patrols, slipping through back corridors and collapsed greenhouses. He had one goal: reach the emergency beacon. Every colony had one, an underground relay tied directly to Earth's Luna Command. It bypassed bureaucracy, ignored politics. A final cry for help. Most colonies never had to use it. Sariah 4 wasn't supposed to either. Jules stumbled into the remains of the old refinery carrying Mira, now her legs too weak to keep going. The entrance to the beacon station was buried under a collapsed beam and a pile of soil. He dropped to his knees and began to dig, bleeding hands clawing at dirt and debris. "Daddy," Mira whispered, "I'm tired." "I know, baby," he said through gritted teeth. "Just a little more." He found the hatch. The lockpad blinked red. Dead, no power. Jules looked down at Mira, unconscious now, her face pale. He leaned over the panel, pressed his bloodied palm against the override. Nothing. He slammed it again and again. Finally a flicker, then green. A pulse of light spread from the console, and somewhere deep beneath the ground, the beacon awakened. 13 minutes later, Luna Command received the distress call. An Earth silent for decades stirred. Earth awakens the wolves. The distress signal from Sariah 4 tore through the quiet of Luna Prime like a scream in a cathedral. It bypassed the diplomatic channels. It wasn't routed through the Council of Worlds or processed by interplanetary intelligence. It hit Luna Command's central terminal with a Level 7 emergency clearance, the kind only used when entire colonies vanished. Admiral Reina Soles had not slept in 36 hours. She hadn't needed to. Her body ran on black coffee, adrenaline, and a deep, hollow fury. When the footage came in grainy but unmistakable, she watched it in silence. A burning dome, the silhouette of a child trying to crawl, a woman vaporized mid-scream, fields turned into cinders. She watched every frame. When the screen went dark, she didn't ask for consensus. "Mobilize the 7th Fleet," she ordered. A junior officer, barely out of academy, hesitated. "Ma'am, protocol." "We burn them," Solace said, eyes still locked on the screen. Do it. Across Earth's orbit, silence shattered. Massive dreadnoughts that had been docked in low orbit since the solar conflicts grown to life engines. Once silent memorials to a forgotten past now hummed with retribution. Old warships retooled with experimental thrusters, gravity cores and dark matter cannons were pulled from deep vaults. Above them, sleek destroyers and drone carriers lit up like a swarm of fireflies in a storm. Hangar bays swelled with activity. Men, women, synthetics, and constructs rushed to stations. Armor was sealed. Power cores were charged. Dropships were prepped in eerie silence. Not a word was shouted. Everyone knew what was coming. Captain Arlen Drax stood at the edge of Drop Platform 7 watching the belly of the UES Hellstorm fill with exo-armored troops. His own armor sat behind him. Dark matte black streaked with old scars that had never been buffed out. His gauntlet hissed as it locked into place. He didn't move, he didn't blink. His face was calm, unreadable. When the final trooper stepped into formation, Drax turned and spoke. "This isn't a clean op," he said, voice low, but cutting through the hum of engines. "There are no hostages, no treaties, no mercy." He stepped closer. Eyes swept across the rows, soldiers of all types. Human, cybernetic, non-binary, genetically augmented. Some clenched their fists, others looked numb. They wiped out Sariah 4, a farming colony. No defenses. Children, elders, medics. His tone didn't rise, but the fury beneath it was a current. They didn't come for land. They came to make a point. He paused, letting the words sink in. "So we make one back. Louder now, sharper. We drop in. We erase their forward bases. No survivors, no second chances. We send one message to every system in this quadrant. A breath. You don't touch Earth." The roar that followed could have cracked steel fists slammed against armor. Boots stamped the metal deck. The soldiers didn't shout in joy. This wasn't celebration, it was purpose. Drax turned sharply and marched toward the dropship. Behind him, the elite Hellhammer unit followed 20 soldiers clad in black-on-black exo-armor, bristling with banned tech and weapons never shown in public. They weren't just warfighters. They were the blade Earth had kept sheathed for decades. The 7th Fleet began its burn toward Trivan-controlled space. From the observation deck of the Hellstorm, Earth appeared behind them, a quiet blue sphere. Beautiful, fragile worth, bleeding for. Halfway through the journey, turbulence shook the interior of the dropship. "Brace," shouted the pilot. Rookies grabbed onto straps. Drax didn't move. He'd ridden storms before this one wasn't even close. The mission objective flashed across HUD's Zoral 5, a volcanic moon used by the Dominion as an ore refinery and weapons hub. Recent recon showed Dominion ships present the same class as those identified over Sariah 4. That was enough. When the dropships breached atmosphere, heat shields flared orange and red. The moon below pulsed with rivers of lava and tectonic violence. Towers of black alloy pierced the crust. Part refinery, part fortress. In the cargo bay, Drax watched the countdown tick to 0. Doors open. Hell was waiting. "Go!" They dropped like thunder. Exosuits roared to life, hitting the ground in perfect formation. Drones deployed overhead, railguns locked targets. The first blast came from a tri-plasma mortar sent screaming into the southern gate of the compound. The wall exploded in a shower of molten debris. The Dominion barely had time to react. A Trian soldier rushed Drax, 9 feet tall, serrated blade drawn, glowing with energy. Drax ducked low, twisted, and drove a compressed core knife into the alien's ribs. Black ichor sprayed. The Trian collapsed with a gurgle. "You picked the wrong species," Drax muttered, yanking the blade free. The Hellhammer unit moved like a swarm of precision. Room by room, wall by wall. Screams echoed, surrendering Dominion. Soldiers were ignored. Memories of Sariah were still too fresh. By the time the sun dipped behind the ash-choked sky, Zoral 5 was no longer a base. It was a crater, and Earth was just getting started. Zoral 5 burns. Zoral 5 bled fire. The volcanic moon screamed with tectonic agony as Earth's wrath tore into its crust. Plasma cannons ruptured, refineries collapsed into their own slag pits. The black towers of the Dominion, once proud and defiant, became nothing more than glowing ruins silhouetted against rivers of lava. The Hellhammer unit moved through the smoke like phantoms, eyes glowing behind their visors, armor steaming from the heat and blood. They advanced in tight formation, not with urgency but with precision. Their purpose was not battle. It was execution. Captain Arlen Drax stood at the center of the storm, breathing in sulfur and scorched metal. The exo-armor filtered out the toxins, but it couldn't filter out the memories. Every wall he passed seemed to echo with the silent screams of Sci-Fi 4. Every enemy soldier he dropped another answer. They came across a control bunker, half submerged in molten rock. The roof caved in. Inside, several Dominion officers, unarmed, hands raised, tried to speak. Some begged in broken Terran. Drax raised his rifle. There was no command given. No hesitation. The room fell silent. Bodies crumpled in the ash. Orders were clear. One of his squad murmured, "No survivors." Drax didn't reply. They weren't just killing soldiers anymore. They were erasing presence. These outposts weren't strategic. They weren't hubs for civilians or centers of governance. They were strongholds, and now they were rubble. Above the moon, Earth's 7th Fleet continued its sweep. Orbital strikes fell like meteors, guided by targeting arrays and drone intelligence. No blind fire, no collateral damage, only precision, only death. Admiral Solace watched from the command bridge of the UES Wrecker, a ship so vast it had never been intended to leave dry dock. It wasn't elegant. It was a slab of war. Reactors, hangars, weapons banks, armor, plating thicker than old-world bunkers. And now it floated above Zoro 5 like a sentence of death. She didn't smile at the victory. She didn't speak at all. She just marked the phase as complete and forwarded coordinates for the next strike. Down below, Drax moved toward the central refinery nexus. Lava fountains blasted steam as tectonic shifts cracked the compound floor. The heat sensors in his visor were overloaded. Bodies lit up like candles, enemy and allied alike. His squad was down 2 men. Corporal Vass had caught shrapnel to the neck. Medic unit confirmed it was instant. No one paused. The Dominion counterattack came late and disorganized. A group of elite Trian soldiers, larger, faster, more vicious, launched a desperate charge across the slag field. Plasma bolts screamed. One of them reached Drax. He met it head-on. They clashed steel against alien alloy, sparks blood. The Trian landed a blow shoulder to chest, denting Drax's armor. He staggered but recovered fast. A flash pulse grenade ignited behind the enemy, and Drax took the opening. He shoved his rifle aside, drew his blade, and carved up through the alien's throat. It fell gurgling, twitching, then stilled. Behind him, the Hellhammer squad was breaching the core. Drones swept and screams followed. The last pocket of resistance tried to surrender again. Young Trian soldiers, barely trained, dropping weapons and falling to their knees. "Orders," Santi asked, breathing heavy. Drax stared at the shaking forms. One was muttering something, a prayer maybe. He remembered Mira back on Sci-Fi 4. Huddled in the rubble, blood on her face, eyes wide with questions he still couldn't answer. Drax lowered his weapon just slightly. Then he raised it again. "Clear the room," Santi nodded. And just like that, Mercy died again. By dusk, Zoro 5 was declared neutralized. No living signals remained, surveillance confirmed. The entire outpost was destroyed. Black smoke spiraled into the atmosphere like a signal fire to the galaxy. Earth wasn't just fighting, it was cleansing. But not everyone celebrated. In the civilian chambers of Luna Prime, political discourse had begun to fracture. Reports from the battlefield showed no prisoners. No remains, just names listed as confirmed kills. Senator Lyra Voss demanded a hearing. "We're becoming what we claim to fight," she said before a muted assembly. No one listened. No one dared interrupt the thunder. Back aboard the wrecker, Drax sat alone in the medbay visor, cracked blood crusting on his jaw. His side ached, bruised, maybe broken. He waved off the medic. Pain was part of the penance. He scrolled through the mission report. Neutralized targets, 117 confirmed. Non-combatants 0 reported. But he knew he had seen faces that weren't soldiers. Eyes that didn't fight back. Bodies that didn't resist. And he had pulled his trigger anyway. The worst part, it hadn't felt wrong. Not then, not until the silence returned. Zoro 5 burned beneath them and Earth moved forward. The next target was already in the queue. Retribution echoes through the stars. The destruction of Zoro 5 wasn't just a battlefield victory. It was a message, and the galaxy heard it loud and clear. Across distant systems on worlds both civilized and savage, the footage spread. Dominion surveillance drones had captured fragments before their towers collapsed. Low-resolution clips of human soldiers marching through molten rubble of Triban warriors, butchered mid-surrender of orbital fire, reducing strongholds to glass. On Vexor Prime, capital of the Trivan Dominion, the War Council met in silence beneath crystal arches that once symbolized power. Now they felt like cages. Lord Commander Zerx watched the footage on loop, his scaled fists clenched tighter with each replay. The humans hadn't just won, they had humiliated them. No declarations, no diplomacy. Zerx growled. They came like beasts. Minister Dravara, shrouded in ceremonial red, leaned forward slowly. Her voice was level, emotionless. What did we expect, Zerks? We slaughtered their civilians. We burned children. Now they burn us. Another voice spoke from the shadows, low composed, almost cold. The overseer of intelligence, a figure seldom seen in public, stepped forward. We underestimated them, she said flatly. Her gaze swept the council. Earth has spent 2 generations pretending to be peaceful, quiet, tamed, but it was just hibernation. Now that they have awakened, they remember what war tastes like, and it tastes good. No one argued. In the center of the chamber, a galactic map hovered. Red zones marked Dominion territories. Slowly, painfully, blue dots began to spread. Not large territories, not invasions. Strikes, pinpoint attacks on relay hubs, fuel depots, command centers. Surgical, merciless, coordinated with frightening precision. They're not holding territory, the overseer continued. They're not conquering, they're retaliating. Every move is meant to inflict psychological damage. Zerk slammed a fist against the table. Then we strike back. Full force. Burn Earth to cinders. No. The overseer snapped, eyes flaring. That's exactly what they want. She gestured to the map. The Council of Worlds is watching. So are our trade partners. If we retaliate against Earth homeworld, we become the villains outright. We lose our political mask. Right now, we can still play the victim. Victim Zerk spat the word. I want us to survive. Silence, bitter ashen. Far from the halls of power, whispers stirred in darker places. On neutral planets like Velimar and Chorus 3, long oppressed by the Dominion, stories began to spread. Stories of human fleets appearing without warning, obliterating military stations, and then vanishing. Of humans who didn't loot, didn't garrison, didn't stay. They just left ashes. And in those ashes, a strange hope took root. Maybe, just maybe, Earth was the one species the Dominion couldn't break. On backwater mining colonies, slaves passed data fragments and secret footage of Captain Drax disarming a Trian giant with his bare hands, of Admiral Solace's fleet moving in perfect silence through starfields, delivering judgment like gods in metal robes. The name Earth stopped being a whisper of curiosity. It became a myth, a warning, a prayer. Back on Luna Prime, the political storm brewed hotter. In the marble halls of the New Geneva chambers, senators shouted across holographic projections of burning outposts and refugee arcs caught in the crossfire. We are becoming monsters. Senator Voss screamed, her voice echoing off the rotunda walls. This is no longer justice. This is annihilation. Across from her, Defense Secretary Morgan Hale didn't flinch. His face remained cold, unreadable. They made an example of us, he said. We're returning the lesson. Tripled. Children are dying, and so did ours. Around them, the chamber fractured, half the voices demanding restraint, the other half demanding escalation. Outside that dome of politics, however, Earth's people spoke in a different voice. The people of the old cities from Detroit to New Shanghai remembered the screams from Soraya, the images of bodies, the silence of Mira Moraine's eyes. And they didn't want peace. They wanted vengeance. Back aboard the Hellstorm, Drax read intercepted reports from the next strike zone. Varkos 3 Dominion munitions. Depot, he said nothing. He had nothing left to say. His hands itched for action. His mind burned with questions he didn't know how to answer. He didn't sleep anymore. The only thing that brought silence was movement. Orders were incoming. The 9th Battalion was en route, but before the next firestorm, there would be a pause. And in that pause, the galaxy held its breath because Earth wasn't just retaliating anymore. It was redefining what it meant to be human. What mercy costs. Captain Arlen Drax crouched behind the smoldering wreck of a Dominion hover tank, breath ragged blood crusting along the crack in his visor. His side burned shrapnel probably, but he hadn't checked, didn't matter. Varkos 3 was a ruin now, just another name on the growing list of erased Dominion worlds. His squad was down to half strength. They had taken the munitions depot, leveled its generators, cracked its shield domes, and turned its bunkers into smoking pits of slag and bone. But it hadn't felt like victory. The air stank of scorched metal and the cloying rot of alien flesh. Flames still danced across half-collapsed corridors. The echo of screams lingered under the silence like a memory refusing to die. Drax keyed his comm medic. Corporal Santi slid in beside him, cauterizer already in hand. Sir, you need evac. We hold position, Drax said without emotion. Wait for the 9th. They're not due for 2 hours, she replied. We're exposed. They'll come. He didn't explain further. He didn't need to. Orders were all they had left. But then a sound broke the silence. Not static, not engines, not the rumble of tectonic shifts. A voice, small, fragile, frightening in its humanity. Is anyone there, please? We're in the tunnels. My mom is hurt. Drax froze. The voice repeated, young female alien. Santi turned confused. Did that come from our channel? No, Drax said local frequency. She hesitated. We thought this place was evacuated. They either lied or left people behind. Drax activated his helmet mic. Identify yourself, who are you? Surreal came the trembling reply. My mom worked the machines, they shot her. She's bleeding. Please don't leave us. For a moment, everything inside Drax went still. The rage that had propelled him through fire and steel twisted in his chest. For weeks, he'd run on fury, the kind that didn't pause, didn't question, the kind that silenced doubt. But this wasn't a soldier calling. This was a child. He looked to Santi. She didn't speak. Finally, he whispered, I'm sending help. Santi blinked, sir. Our orders. We're not the Trions, Drax said sharply. Not yet. He marked the signal. Pull a field team. Get them out alive. And just like that, something shifted. Small, quiet, but real. The recovery unit located the tunnel entrance beneath a half-demolished fuel corridor. Inside, they found the girl young, barely more than 10, and her mother, a Dominion technician, bleeding from a gut wound but alive. No weapons, no comms, just a terrified woman shielding her child with her body. They didn't resist. The medics patched them up, transferred them to a neutral evac ship heading for orbit. No one said anything. But word spread. It reached the 9th before they arrived. It reached the Admiral before the next strike. And it planted a seed. Back aboard the UES Wrecker, Admiral Celeste reviewed the report in silence. Civilian extraction, she asked, her voice unreadable. Yes, ma'am, the officer replied, ordered by Captain Drax himself. She tapped her fingers against the display. Any pushback from command? None yet, but Defense Secretary Hale flagged it for review. Of course he did. Elsewhere on Vexor Prime, that same act sent ripples through the Dominion's heart. In a secured war chamber, the Overseer of Intelligence reviewed a separate report, one compiled from Dominion loyalists and sympathetic watchers. Human units sparing children, evacuating wounded, rebuilding what they destroyed. Emotion, she thought, staring into the hologram. Their curse or their greatest weapon? She made no mention of it to Zerx. Not yet. Let him believe the enemy was still all fire and steel. Let him underestimate again. Back in the field, Drax sat beside Surreal, the young Triven girl, now safely aboard a neutral medical frigate. Her skin shimmered faintly under the soft glow of the field lamps, the scaled texture of her species catching the light like living marble. You're not like the others, she said quietly. Drax didn't answer immediately. He hadn't slept, hadn't eaten, just sat there, armor half stripped, blood still under his fingernails. I'm not sure that's a good thing, he finally said. You look sad when you win, she said, and that hit harder than any blade. He stood slowly. His body ached, but it wasn't just the wounds. It was something deeper, something he didn't have a name for. War isn't about winning, he thought. It's about surviving what comes after. He hadn't known why he'd spared her. Guilt, maybe. Remorse, possibly something worse. He'd followed every order until now. And for the first time, disobedience had felt right. But that scared him too, because part of him hadn't wanted to save her. Part of him had wanted to finish what they'd started. What mercy costs, he realized, isn't weakness, it's memory. And memory, once you allow it in, never lets you kill the same way again. The whisper in the dark. Deep in the cold silence of space, a stolen transmission flickered to life on Earth's encrypted channels, intercepted by a cyber warfare relay orbiting a dead star. The message was fragmented, nearly incomprehensible until it wasn't. It detailed refugee transports leaving Dominion military hubs, only they weren't carrying civilians. They were moving components, dangerous components. And one term repeated itself across multiple sectors: the last whisper. When the decoded files reached Admiral Reyna Solis, she didn't speak for a long time. She just stared at the words, jaw clenched, pulse slowing to a crawl. Confirmed source, she said quietly. Verified her, EXO officer replied. It appears to be a biowave cognitive disruptor, not a bomb, not kinetic, designed to destroy neural function, planet-wide. A silence fell over the bridge. Did they offer our children mercy? She whispered. No one answered. She gave the order. All battalions reroute. Priority target, neutralize the whisper. In the shadows of Vexor Prime, the Triven High Council convened not in their public towers, but beneath the surface in a war chamber carved from obsidian and shame. Lord Commander Zerx stood before a biometric console, watching a device the size of a melon pulse with violet light. It looked harmless, elegant even. Coral stood beside him, former Dominion scientist, exiled traitor, now summoned in desperation. You said you had a weapon, Zerx growled. I have something better, Coral replied, caressing the device like a lover. The last whisper doesn't destroy buildings, doesn't scar landscapes, it erases thought. Identity? It silences the mind itself. Zerx's fists trembled. You'd use this on Earth. Coral smiled. No, I'd use it on Luna Prime, their capital. Take their voice away. Let them rule nothing, remember nothing. Even Zerx recoiled. This is suicide. Coral shrugged. So is mercy. But if we can't win, we'll make sure they never speak again. Far above aboard the UES wrecker, Admiral Solus stared at the final map projection. Vexor Prime lay, one jump away. Earth's fleets had strangled every system around it. Communications, dark, alliances broken. The Dominion bled from every border. But now with this, it wouldn't be victory. It would be extinction. Still no surrender came. No answer to her transmission. So she gave the command, hold orbital strike, prep infiltration. I'm going in. Her bridge crew turned stunned. You, Admiral? Yes. She looked at Drax standing at her side. I need someone who's seen their minds up close. Drax nodded once. Then gear me up. They deployed at 0400 Galactic time in a stealth drop pod. Solus, Drax, and a 5-person strike team. No insignias, no beacons, just black armor and cold resolve. They landed deep beneath the Dominion capital into the husk of an old political prison, long abandoned by light and mercy. The air smelled of oil, iron, and old blood. Movement pinged across their sensors. We're not alone, Drax muttered, rifle raised. They pushed forward through collapsed corridors, flashlights sweeping shadows that breathed. Then they found it, a chamber humming with unnatural energy. At its center, the last whisper pulsating with psychic frequency. And beside it, Coral. I wondered if you'd come. Yourselves, he said, voice eerily calm. How poetic, the butcher and the ghost. You're outnumbered, Solus warned. Coral raised a hand to the biopad. You wipe us out, you become monsters. You spare us, you're fools. Either way, I win. But before he could press the pad, a sharp crack echoed. A plasma bolt slammed into his shoulder. He collapsed. The shooter, a woman in civilian garb. Minister Varala. No more monsters, she said. Solus rushed to the pad. The device powered down. Silence fell. Why, she asked Varala. Because we want to live, she replied, voice shaking. Even if it means surrender. For the first time in the war, Earth had not won through fire. It had won through restraint, through choice, through a whisper. We remember who we are. The war didn't end with thunder. There was no grand assault, no final bombardment from orbit, no triumphant march through Dominion capitals. It ended with silence, not the kind that follows death, but the kind that waits after a held breath is finally released. The last whisper was dismantled by Earth's Science Division within hours of recovery. Its core, still pulsing faintly with residual energy, was sealed within a triple-walled containment unit and personally escorted by Admiral Solus back to Luna Prime. She didn't speak the entire way. By the time they arrived, the galaxy already knew. Vexor Prime had fallen, but not by fire, by surrender. Some called it weakness, others called it restraint. But all agreed on one thing. Earth now held the galaxy's attention. In the council chamber of New Geneva, Admiral Solus stood one final time in her dress uniform. The weight of decisions, trillions of lives balanced on trigger, pulls and silences hung on her shoulders like lead. They had a choice, she said, voice even solemn. Die in defiance or live in humility. They chose to live. She paused, and we let them. Senator Voss, still sharp, still unforgiving, rose from her platform. Some are already calling it a mistake, that we should have finished it, that mercy buys us nothing. Solus didn't blink, then let them speak. The galaxy saw something no empire has dared show in centuries, mercy backed by power that terrifies them. And it did. In the weeks that followed, systems long afraid to stand against the Dominion now raised neutral flags. Minor empires once disdainful of Earth began sending guarded diplomatic envoys, not out of affection, but out of fear. They understood now, Earth didn't need to conquer. It could destroy, and chose not to. Back on Sariah 4, rebuilding had begun. The air was still thick with ash in some areas, but new crops sprouted. Green slowly reclaimed the soil that had once run red. Water purification towers rose again, this time shielded, guarded. And Jules Moraine, older now, still walked the scarred fields. He worked alongside engineers lifting beams, rewiring panels. Not because he was told to, but because it gave him purpose. He had survived. Mira had survived. She stood nearby, a little older, waving a small Earth flag at a landing transport. A child who had once run from fire, now welcoming those who came to rebuild. Jules watched her chest tight with something between pride and dread. They were Awi, but at what cost? A shadow moved beside him. He turned. Arlen Drax. His armor was gone, replaced with simple field gear. No medals, no insignia, just a man with tired eyes. I heard what you did, Jules said, handing him a flask. Saving that girl. Standing down, Drax took it slowly. I don't know if it was the right choice. Jules nodded. It was human. That's enough. They stood there watching Mira chase wind through the dirt. For a moment there was peace. Not the fragile kind from before the war, but the heavy kind that came after. The kind you had to carry. Elsewhere in the center of Luna Prime, a monument was erected. It wasn't a statue of victory. It wasn't a list of names. It was built from fragments of Soraya, 4 melted structures, scorched plasteel, shattered glass, fused with shards of Vexor Prime's obliterated weapons. A towering spire of pain and resilience. There were no banners, no anthem, just a single sentence carved in every known galactic language. We were hurt. We struck back, but we remembered who we were. Admiral Solis retired not long after. She refused medals, declined interviews, said nothing to the press. Her last act was to authorize the monument, and then she disappeared into quiet anonymity. Captain Aurelin Drax returned to Earth. He visited Surreal and her mother, now living in a neutral protectorate. She smiled when she saw him. He couldn't smile back. He still carried the faces, still heard the whispers. He didn't know if the galaxy would ever trust humans. He didn't know if humans should, but he knew this. They had stopped themselves. When vengeance could have turned to extinction, they had stepped back. Not because they were weak, but because they chose to be something stronger. In the end, the Dominion signed the Treaty of Soraya, a name chosen not by Earth's diplomats, but by Jules Moran. When asked what it should be called, "I want them to remember where it started," he said. The treaty stripped the Dominion of half their systems, dismantled their slave fleets, and put their warlords on trial. But it didn't wipe them out. Their cities still stood. Their children still played, and that above all else would echo across history. Earth had become many things in the eyes of the stars, destroyer, avenger myth. But now it had become something rare, a species that could hold the blade and still know when to lower it.